tends to rise because of the idea that the other person is bad, and so they need to be controlled. And so a conservative comes along and says, well, no, we don't need to be controlled because freedom is that which produces goodness and wealth and profit and goodness. And when we have freedom, we're able to freely produce goods and services and bring us up away from misery. And that's the purpose of freedom, because freedom allows the individual to make priorities in his mind. And I'm defining freedom actually right now. Freedom is the making of a priority in your mind and then effectuating that priority into reality. And that is freedom. And when you effectuate, and as people, your populace, and as voters will use their freedom to do what is good for them, which is dictum number one. All life does that which is good for them. And so freedom is the promotion of the individuals of society to make their own priorities and effectuate them into their lives, and when they do this, they're doing it because they want to be free. They want to do that which is good for them. And so when they do that which is good for them, they are happy. And why are they happy? Because the effectuation of these priorities generally bring efficiency into their lives. In other words, they'll get more for less, because all of economics is governed by the individual transaction. And so the human will make a transaction, and he'll start with his sacrifice. And he sacrifices his risk, his time, his effort. He'll use his knowledge in an atmosphere of risk to produce something. And that's called a sacrifice. And what he does with that is he seeks a reward for this sacrifice. And so the sacrifice equals a reward. And when the sacrifice is small and the reward is large, that's called motivation. And he takes advantage of that efficiency that he brings in, because maybe he invented, I don't know, any of the famous inventions all throughout history. And maybe some guy comes along and invents the telephone, and suddenly everybody can communicate easier. And this brings a tremendous efficiency into society. And thus the inventor was able to sell that and profited from it. And he made goodness for his life and brought himself up away from misery and brought others into the realm of goodness also. And so he does it by making the transaction, which is initiated by freedom. And so now there are two ways to look at society, and the arguments from a conservative to the liberal one goes for control and one goes for freedom. And this back and forth is the nature of political talk. And so when society goes, as per dictum 3, goes little by little over to the left, and someone goes, no, we got to stop and bring it back. That's called a mini revolution. And it's dragged back, and you have a revolution, and suddenly it's just like the American Revolution, the French Revolution. They're bringing you back into conservatism. And so that's why the contentions go up and down. The more that there are some good little policies that come to fruition, that maybe the left come up with, and like universal health care. Okay, that's a good idea on the surface, but does it really bring an efficiency into society? And so that's a big argument. And so the right will take a look at it and say, well, this kind of sounds good. I mean, everybody should have health care. Okay, so how do we do it? And then there's a huge argument about it. And then eventually you might see that, well, a total health care provided by the government is not so efficient. That's inefficient. And so the argument goes, and they drag it back and say, maybe this is not the right road to go down. And then you end up with little parts of one and little parts of the other. And that's the political conversation that goes on. So, but when somebody comes in and does a mini revolution and drags it back, well, it's a war. And that's what happens.
Well, you've just so clarified so many things that weigh on my mind every day, simply because there's always this feeling of guilt I have because I find I can't communicate with Democrats, but I can communicate with Republicans, and I identify as a Democrat. But the fact of the matter is, and I'm going to give you real life examples, is, They call them rhinos in the Republican world. There are no Republicans in name only. Republicans are generally more open-minded. They should have dinos. The minute you say, like I've said to Democrats, maybe there should be an entitlement reset. Maybe we need to rethink that a little, the give everything free. And I looked at Bernie Sanders as not a success story. I looked at it as really a sad story. The 12 million young people gave up all hope of succeeding with the American dream and submitting to socialism. I look, young people used to be the ones that wanted to be the next Elon Musk, and I'm not building Elon Musk on a pedestal. But I'm just saying, young people used to be the ones that wanted to succeed. They wanted to buy a big house. And then comes Bernie Sanders. What does he call himself? A socialist, but he calls himself a proud socialist or something. I forget what term he used for himself. And I don't want socialism in America. And I've told Democrats, stop with the universal health care bullshit because it won't work in a country this size. And it simply doesn't work in even smaller countries. People are waiting for simple procedures for 8, 9 months. And the discomfort and the fact that simple procedure can turn, the fact that the need for that simple procedure can turn into death on the waiting list is not what you want in America. And it's going to be significantly worse because we're a bigger country. And I've said the acronym is wrong. The ACA shouldn't be the Affordable Care Act because at times it's not affordable. It should be the Available Care Act. It's always available. No matter what happens in your life, you can get a price on health care based on your age and gender. They won't say, oh, you just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. It's $1 million a year for the policy because we'll only spend $500,000 on it on coverage. No, it fixed that. So and I tell Republicans, hey, how about we just settle down? Let's just stop attacking the ACA. Let's just fix it a little bit. Let's fund the high risk corridors. Let's increase the subsidy. A lot of them embrace the idea. But if you say that to a Democrat, they'll run you out the back door in a room saying, we need you to have health care and you're an idiot and get the hell out of our face. And so I really see what you're saying when you say Republicans embrace some of the ideas that we offer, and it happened in COVID. In COVID, I said to people, look what's happening in New York City. The people that are quarantining are getting COVID at a higher rate simply because the buildings are so big, they're breathing recycled air. The whole idea of quarantining is a problem. Stop enforcing it. Let them walk out in the parks. And where Donald Trump sort of got a sort of feeling of absolute love from the conservatives is when he said to churches, if you want to congregate, congregate. The Democrats said no congregating at churches. And it was like, this is political suicide. These people want to meet their friends in church. We cannot control that. And we understand the consequences. But they never presented the consequences as the individual getting COVID. They expressed the consequences as the individual spreading COVID to the rest of the individuals. And it wasn't so, really. It was not that contagious. There was not such a need for such a draconian program of quarantining. I mean, I had no job. I got laid off because of COVID. And we walk in the park and even the public bathrooms are locked. And it's like, I mean, it makes no sense. I mean, what is the difference? We're out in the park. I mean, and so I totally understand now where the state, where a lot of conservatives literally don't have disdain for liberal policy. They have disdain for liberals. And
So you just defined really the difference between a liberal and a conservative. You talked about the need for freedom in society, be able to combat COVID, and then the will to, on the other side, to control individuals to the point of quarantine, which was bad for society. And so that is the very core of the argument, freedom versus control.
and the whole idea of everybody has to be vaccinated. Everybody. And people are like, I don't want the vaccination. And there was examples. One of them was a friend of mine. He didn't have the vaccination. He ultimately got the Delta coronavirus. He didn't even think he was going to make it. He himself said, I was wrong. It doesn't change the fact. He posted on Facebook, I was wrong. I should have got the damn vaccination. It doesn't change the fact that it was his choice. It should not be forced on him. The indoctrination of the vaccination was the issue, not the vaccination. The idea that if you don't get vaccinated, you are this terrible citizen, and the conviction. And then they had all these slides and these scales, and we're beating the curve here, but we're not beating the curve here. And the reason we're not beating the curve here is because the majority of people haven't been vaccinated, but it still should have been their choice. And Democrats stood on this high horse and really lost all credibility. And that it may not have been the Affordable Care Act that was the inflection period. It may have very well been COVID, where the whole country shut down. And I remember we were in Florida, and when the state reopened, we were like, oh my God, this is wonderful. Let's just get back to life. Let's see what happens. I don't know. I may actually, for the first time in a year, walk back through the shopping center and get hit by a car. But you know what? At least I can walk back into work. I can get out of the house for 6 hours without wondering what other TV show is left to be watched. And they just really decimated my entire life for a whole year. I forgave them, but the truth is, some people don't forgive them. Some people still talk about all these things that they've mastered at screwing over the pooch really hard. And I understand now more than ever, because I just recently walked into a Republican campaign office, and I felt more welcome there than I did every time I've ever walked into a Democrat meeting. I've always felt like I was the outcast because I'm a center right or a moderate or something. I do believe in championing the vulnerable. I don't believe in everything free. I don't believe if everybody has free college, right? It's kind of like when Jim Carrey was God and everybody won the lottery. Well, then the jackpot was only $1 each. It's kind of like if everybody has free college, well, everybody's applying. I got college. I too have 4 years degree. Well, then you're up against the same thing. So I never really looked at it this way.